the roundtable for Black History Month with Green Party Leader Annamie Paul and special guests Ngozi Paul, Warren Clarke, and Dr. Ngozi Lamptey will now begin. Bonjour tout le monde. La table ronde sur le mois de l'histoire des Noirs avec l'Annamie Paul et les invités spéciaux Ngozi Paul, Warren Clarke et Dr. Ngozi Lamptey va maintenant commencer.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much, Rosie. And hello to everyone. First and foremost, happy Black History Month. I am coming to you today from the traditional territories of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat. Bonjour tout le monde. D'abord, je vous souhaite toutes et tous une joyeuse célébration du mois de l'histoire des Noirs. Je vous adresse aujourd'hui des territoires traditionnels des Mississauga, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, et Huron-Wendat. I am so thrilled to be having this event. I am so thrilled. First, as an opportunity to really acknowledge this month, not because we shouldn't be talking about issues that relate to the Black diaspora here in Canada and elsewhere all the time, but it is nice to have a moment to really focus on that and to educate and to contemplate and to celebrate. I'm also always thrilled to showcase Black excellence. And that is truly what we have on this call today. Excellence, period. But since it's Black History Month, I will add that descriptive as well to it. I'm very much looking forward to the discussion that we're going to have. It is, in fact, a serious discussion. It's intended to be a thoughtful discussion and reflection on this particular moment for the Black diaspora within Canada. Some of the issues that we have historically faced that have only been exacerbated and perhaps highlighted during this pandemic. Some of the things that we can do to help to educate people as well about the history of Black people in this country, about the need to continue to work toward a truly just society, the need to work toward dismantling anti-Black racism. I'm looking forward to this discussion very, very much. And certainly over the last number of weeks, a few things have come up that I thought made this particular roundtable particularly necessary. We know, for instance, that during this pandemic, the Black community has been hit particularly hard. Dr. Lamptey will confirm this, and I think that my eyesight did not play any tricks on me, but I believe that there was 1 month last summer, for instance, here in Toronto, where Black people accounted for a third of the cases, a third of the infection cases, and there were other months where we accounted for a quarter. We know that the kind of jobs that members of our community most often have or have in, let's say, disproportionate numbers, the precarious jobs, the low-income jobs, the essential jobs that require us to head out into the community every day, have put our community at added risk and also have been the first amongst those to be lost, and many of those jobs have not yet been recovered. I won't enter into too many details because there are much more expert people on both of those things than me. We also know that there were some changes proposed to our criminal justice legislation, some of which were intentionally targeting the Black community and Black people who are disproportionately incarcerated, receive disproportionate sentencing, and are disproportionately affected by mandatory minimum sentencing. And then we know that the struggle to make sure that people understand the legacy of the Black diaspora in Canada, that continues. And we want to see Emancipation Day recognized exactly because it is very hard to construct a brighter future without fully understanding our history. Alors, nous sommes ici aujourd'hui avec des luminaires, des étoiles dans notre communauté pour discuter les thèmes importants, les thèmes qui ont été soulevés et soulignés par la pandémie. Le fait que les communautés noires à travers le Canada ont été plus impactées, plus touchées par les infections de COVID, que les types d'emplois que les membres de nos communautés tiennent dans les nombres disproportionnés sont en fait les emplois nécessaires et essentiels, mais qui leur ont mis en contact avec le virus. Et en plus, on était les premiers emplois d'être perdus pendant la pandémie. On sait aussi que dans les dernières semaines, le gouvernement a introduit plusieurs projets de loi pour réduire les peines minimales parce qu'il faut reconnaître que la communauté noire et les communautés autochtones sont les plus mal servies par notre système de justice criminelle, surtout en ce qui concerne l'harcèlement. Et finalement, si on veut bâtir un meilleur avenir, il faut connaître et reconnaître notre histoire. Et c'est très important de reconnaître le journée d'émancipation, de le reconnaître comme une fête nationale qu'on fête chaque année. Parce que oui, nous aussi, nous avons notre histoire de colonialisme et l'impact de ça. Alors, je vais passer à les experts pour partager leurs perspectives, leurs expériences, leurs conseils. I'm so pleased today to have with me Dr. Lamptey, Professor Clark, and Ngozi Paul. I'm just going to briefly introduce all three at once so that we can just head right into the discussion and your comments. Dr. Lamptey is the Deputy Medical Officer of Health at the City of Toronto. She obtained her medical degree at the University of Toronto, as well as degrees in epidemiology and public health management from Yale, and the Bachelor of Liberal Arts from Princeton University. We just realized that we're both Princeton Tigers, so it's nice to meet a fellow Tiger. Dr. Lamptey is a public health and preventative medicine physician. She's particularly committed to improving population health through clinical care, policy development, and system advocacy. I'm very pleased also to welcome my, more than anything, a tremendous creative talent within our community, but also my sister, Ngozi. Ngozi is an award-winning stage and screen actress. She's a writer, a director, a producer, born and raised here in Toronto. Some of you will know her from her award-winning play, The Emancipation of Miss Lovely, which was nominated for 6 Door Awards and won Outstanding New Play. She's also appeared in the Netflix series Self-Made, inspired by the life of Madame C.J. Walker. She's also well known for co-creating and executive producing the television spin-off of the theater production of The Kink in My Hair. And she has been advocating tirelessly for many years through her production company and as a community advocate for the recognition of Emancipation Day as a national holiday. And then finally, Professor Warren Clark, who is a sociologist and researcher at Carleton University, whose research interests include, amongst others, youth culture, social citizenship, race and ethnicity, anti-colonialism, and masculinity. His current research is on mapping the experiences and struggles of underemployed Afro-Caribbean Black young men in Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa. And I am so pleased to have, and I should also mention that there's his community event series called Barbershop Talk. That is where all the best talk happens. And so I'm very pleased to say hello to all of you. Thank you so much for being here. And first pass it over to Dr. Lamptey. Dr. Lamptey, as you can imagine from my opening remarks, it's something that that preoccupies me. It's something that I don't think is fully understood. Perhaps you can share what the impact of COVID has been on the Black community. And then also, I would be interested in hearing a little bit about your thoughts regarding the National Advisory Committee on Immunization's recommendation with respect to the prioritization of racialized communities in the next stage of vaccinations. And of course, anything else you would like to share with us. I know you have been giving this a great deal of thought. Dr. Lamptey.
Thank you, Ms. Paul, for that really kind introduction. It's my pleasure to be here. As a physician, we have to approach our practice with our brains, but we also succeed with the connection we make through our heart. And so this topic preoccupies me in both aspects. I'm interested in this as a public health physician and also as a member of the Black community. So Black History Month, I think, gives us a chance to reflect on where we've come from, to remember what we've experienced, and then also to rejoice at what we've been able to accomplish to give us the energy to continue. And the COVID-19 pandemic really has shone a spotlight on what we have long known in public health, that inequities in health or differences in opportunity for health are really shaped by the working and living conditions where you work, where you go to school, where you play. And those opportunities for health are not equally distributed in our society. And a pandemic is by definition showing us the interconnectedness between people. And therefore, those inequities that we knew existed have now been highlighted and exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, and shown how poverty, discrimination, and racism contribute to the chance that you get infected from COVID-19, the chance that you develop complications, and unfortunately, the chance that you might pass away from this infection. So as you were alluding to, racialized populations in the city of Toronto are 2 to 3 times more likely to be infected with COVID-19 and to be hospitalized for COVID-19. And in particular, the populations that experience that disproportionate impact that are racialized are Black people, people of Middle Eastern background, Latin Americans, South Asians, and Southeast Asians. And why is that? It's not so much about the color of their skin. It's about, as I mentioned, the way the color of your skin affects the way people perceive you, treat you, and give you opportunities for adequate housing, for full and gainful employment, for the ability to be connected to other people. And those all affects practical things like, can you stay home when you get sick? Do you have the ability to get tested? Is it actually accessible? Is there public transit or a testing center nearby? And if you do get sick, do you have the ability to stay home because you're not worried about losing income? And can you actually even safely isolate from your family if you're living in a multi-generational family? And are the materials that are potentially going to inform you about how to keep yourself safe and how to keep your family safe accessible to you in your language, with cultural sensitivity, in a way that will speak to you? So we all knew this before the pandemic arrived, but we also heard it directly from racialized populations. So the City of Toronto did take some consultations to hear about the impact of COVID-19 on various communities. And they noted all these experiences that I just mentioned. And what I think is fortunate is that the city didn't just hear it, they listened, and it informed their actions and a COVID-19 equity action plan. And when you listen, or when you pay attention or read the components of this multi-pronged plan, really the actions around the determinants. Yes, access to healthcare services and testing are part of it, but some of the actions that the City of Toronto took were, for example, providing increased access to digital services, because people were commenting about the impact of isolation and loneliness was affecting their mental well-being. It included supports for income and food security. Because as you mentioned, the impact on employment was disproportionate on racialized populations. Shelter and housing support, mental health and family safety, services for seniors. So to truly address the pandemic, you have to address the determinants of health. And when we get to thinking about the rejoicing for the future, that makes me optimistic. You have to be optimistic as a public health physician, because the very nature of prevention means that you're trying to make the future better. So if we can address the social determinants of health now in the pandemic, we'll hopefully be able to get through this pandemic with a better base to give the potential for all our children a better future in health. And if you come from a culture like me, where children in the next generation are collectively reared by the village, then if we make sure that every child and every racialized child starts on a better path for health, then the entire village benefits.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lamptey. And before passing on to our next speaker, I'm just wondering, I mean, if you're able to just tell us what, I'm a big fan of disaggregated data. And I know that the City of Toronto has done quite a lot during the pandemic to truly, as you said, map and collect data about how the virus has impacted various communities. You were able to give a lot of specification. Is that part of what we need to make sure we continue to do in terms of tracking the health of people? I know that it's still quite unusual. I struggle to find that kind of disaggregated data in other jurisdictions. I'm just wondering if you could comment on that. And then again, if you're able to, and you tell me if you're not, we really try to keep these things not partisan in any way, but I don't consider it to be a partisan question, a consideration. Do we expect that here in Toronto and then elsewhere in Ontario, what are you hearing about the likelihood that the NACI recommendation about the prioritization of racialized communities for immunization in stage 2, is that likely to be followed? It's a little more specific than that. It's racialized people, adults, and communities that are particularly impacted. Do you welcome that recommendation, and are you expecting to see it followed in the next stage?
Okay, let me maybe break up the two questions.
Yes, they're totally, yes.
So actually, thank you for mentioning the component of collecting data. So the commitment to that is ongoing. And from a physician point of view, you need information, you need to take a history, you need to do investigations in order to be able to diagnose an issue and apply an appropriate treatment plan. So on the population level, we need that data or information to understand how is the population doing, including various subgroups. So I think the commitment to collecting disaggregated data is there, and it's ongoing. And of course, the way that occurs and the way it appears, I think, is something that we engage impacted communities with, because it needs to inform their actions as well. So I think that commitment is there. On the second component of the NACI recommendation, it is acknowledging what we just talked about, that certain populations have increased exposure to COVID-19 and have experienced increased health impacts because of it. And if you're applying a treatment, you want it to go where it's going to have proportional benefit. And so recognizing that disproportional impact absolutely should be part of planning. As to whether that will be taken up in phase 2, I do not know. Those are matters, I believe, of active planning and discussion. We'll have to wait and see. Mm-hmm. I think some of that component, though, is already coming, just in the sense that even with constrained supply, initial allocations of vaccine were sent to areas that had higher rates overall in the province.
Okay.
So on a macro level, that was occurring, I think.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Lamptey, and hopefully we'll be able to circle back. I have so many questions for you, and I really appreciate having access to your experience on this topic. I'm going to pass now to Ngozi Paul, Ms. Paul. Ngozi, tell us why it is so important. You really always get to the heart of it on this. Please tell us why it is so important for us to recognize Emancipation Day. This is something that you've dedicated years to. You led a petition that was presented in the Parliament back in, I believe it was September or October. It was officially presented and garnered thousands of signatures calling for the recognition of Emancipation Day. Tell us what it would mean and what you think it would mean here in Canada to recognize Emancipation Day as a national day.
Thank you so much, Ms. Paul. I just have to say, I haven't seen Annamie since I cut my hair, and us side by side, we really look alike.
You sure do.
And thank you so much, Dr. Lamptey. Just hearing those statistics is it's quite sobering. It's quite sobering. And sort of bringing it back to Emancipation Day, when sort of confronted with our realities, I find it quite overwhelming. You know, the disparities that our community faces and have faced for generations, when you just put it out there like that in black and white, no pun intended, it's overwhelming. And Emancipation Day is something that actually many people have not actually heard of. I actually had never heard of Emancipation Day until 2017. My mother invited me to an Emancipation Day event. Now, the name of my company is Emancipation Arts, and Annamie mentioned that I wrote a play called The Emancipation of Ms. Lovely, which was performed in 2017. So the idea that somebody like myself, who had two Pan-Africanist parents, had never heard of Emancipation Day, sorry, Mummy, it kind of just blew my mind. And what Emancipation Day is actually recognizing the abolishment of slavery across the entire British Empire. And I found out that a woman named Rosemary Sadlier, who actually is responsible for Black History Month being recognized in Ontario, it's its 25th year anniversary, and Emancipation Day is recognized in Ontario and Ontario only. Which doesn't really actually make any sense to me. You know, unlike yourself, Annamie, and Dr. Lamptey and Professor Clark, you know, I didn't go to Princeton. So I don't understand the reasons why X and Y can't just, why can't we all get to the finish line? The idea that Emancipation Day is not recognized nationally, it honestly makes no sense to me. If we can recognize Victoria Day, why wouldn't we recognize a day when the British Empire said and recognized that that slavery was an immoral practice and it had to stop? Many of us are not even aware of the history of Black people in Canada. I know that with our neighbors to the south, we like to think about, you know, their race relations and their practices of enslaved people. And as Canadians, we always like to think that we were the stop on the Underground Railroad, which we were. But many of us don't know that slavery, enslaving people, was practiced in Canada for hundreds of years as well. And there are many thousands upon thousands of people who were enslaved across the British Empire. And, you know, we still have the Queen on our money. So, I mean, I don't know. Anyways, this is true, though. We still have the Queen on our money. And I feel incredibly strongly that we as a community should decide, what does it mean to be a Canadian now? What are the things that we are going to celebrate moving forward? How are we going to define ourselves and our culture? And how can we celebrate a future by building a future that we actually want to see? I am not involved in I don't understand politics or bills or, my civic engagement, unfortunately, I would say, prior to Annamie leading the charge, has been voting consistently. And when the vote comes around, kind of paying attention to, the platforms. But that's about it, usually. And with Annamie becoming the leader of the Green Party, it has really been a great immersion into how policies are made, how bills are passed, how laws are passed. And these are the laws that affect our day-to-day. Emancipation Day for me, it's just like it's so overwhelming. I'm an artist. I know how to put on a show. So I know how to celebrate Emancipation Day. I'm celebrator in chief. We put up Free Up every year. But working towards actually passing this bill, there have actually been several bills for Emancipation Day to be recognized nationally, which I was unaware of. There was actually a private bill that was read on December the 8th, and so it's gone to its second reading. We did a petition with thousands and thousands of signatures, and I received an email saying, "Thank you." And that was it. And really, it's like, being a sleuth to try to figure out how to actually pass it and take this to the next level. And I really feel, given the social climate, what we need are events, are days, are celebrations that can actually bring us together and give our young people and all of our generations an opportunity to have agency and decide what we believe is important to us. And so that's why I feel Emancipation Day should be. I actually don't understand why it's not recognized nationally already. It actually, no one can tell me why.
We're working on it.
It makes no sense. It's actually like everybody, and also all of the different parties want it to be recognized nationally, and yet it isn't. And I actually don't think that 2021 can pass without Emancipation Day being recognized nationally. So hopefully, anyways, don't get me started. That's what I have to say about it.
We wanted to get you started, and thank you very much for that. Just to maybe use this opportunity to underline that in 2017, the United Nations Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent came to Canada, and in their final report on that visit, one of their key recommendations is that, and observations was that Canada needed to do much more to recognize its history with respect to people of African descent, the good and the bad, and to educate, that there needed to be a much deeper integration of education about people of African descent in our curriculum, in our celebrations of our history, exactly because the legacy of the mistakes that were made is ongoing. And it is, as I said, very hard. I mean, again, they said as well that it is very difficult, of course, to truly confront that legacy without truly understanding it. So they also would not understand why we do not recognize that. And there is a private members bill in Parliament now, and was not a Green Party bill, but of course we support that. And it would be a wonderful thing if this Parliament, while this Parliament is in session, before it dissolves for the next election, finally recognizes Emancipation Day. It would be a fitting tribute to Black History Month to have that recognized. Maybe before this month is over, Ngozi.
Motion 36.
Exactly.
Motion 36.
Exactly. And now finally over to Professor Clark. Professor Clark, thank you so much for being with us. I know everyone wanted for me to refer to them by their first name, but my mother raised me a certain way, and that's just how it is. So it's so good to have you with us. And any of the themes that I mentioned that you want to touch upon, I particularly, as I said, there were quite a number of reforms that were proposed over the last week or so that were supposed to address the anti-Black racism, the systemic racism within criminal justice, acknowledge it and remediate it. We have news coming out, a new report coming out yesterday with respect to solitary confinement and how that practice continues, a practice that has been described by our own correctional services as torture, and one that we know disproportionately impacts Black Canadians who are disproportionately put into solitary confinement, along with Indigenous peoples as well. So any of those things that you want to touch upon, the state of Black men in this country, it's these things disproportionately impact them, we would love to hear about. Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Dr. Lamptey, really appreciate you sharing the space, and Ngozi, appreciate you sharing the space with you. Thanks for the knowledge you have provided. I really appreciated what you had mentioned in the beginning, Annamie, and I appreciate having me a part of this panel. We have to start taking, when we speak about blackness and our black concerns within this Canadian white settler Canadian nation state, saying that twice during that sentence, we have to be uncomfortable to get comfortable. And in doing so, I'm gonna shake the tree a bit.
Okay, here we go. Oh, we lost your sound, Professor Clark.
Am I here? Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you again.
I'll sit up. Not to shake the tree to make people, say, Warren, I don't like you after this, but, one of the things my mentor, Jim Harris Jr. had mentioned to me, and it continues to mention to me, is I'm an educator, and I'm going to stay in that lane. Your opening was amazing, Annamie, and I have to critique it because this is the problem in terms of what Ngozi was mentioning, in terms of how do we fix it? How do we seek agency? And, when we say Happy Black History Month, we are also saying by the end of February, goodbye Black History Month. We'll see you next year. And in saying that, there's like a birthday. Hey, you've turned 39. Congratulations. See you next year. You're 40. So we have to understand and recognize the social discourse and the moments we live in. And Ngozi, I'd like to add value. May I please add value to what you mentioned?
Yes, please add value.
Appreciate you. One of the things, we talk about, Emancipation Day in Canada, it's actually July 9th. I'm not sure if people know that. And, one of the reasons we don't acknowledge it is because Canada strips us of our identity. When you think about multiculturalism, for instance, it groups Canadians in two ways, the majority versus the visible minorities. And what that does under that visible minority umbrella, it says everybody who has color to their skin is under that title. It's harder to define people based on their cultures and their ethnicities, or they're defining themselves. But we in our contemporary moments, we see that we're using terms such as POCs, and now more commonly BIPOC, which is still doing something that the Multiculturalism Act itself did years ago, which is to group us into these categories and take away from our identities. And why is this important is because when we talk about, addressing and appreciating our Black Canadian histories, we're not even appreciated as individuals or based on our ethnicities within this colonized nation state. Take, for example, when you have people from, Nigeria immigrating or migrating to Canada, the first thing they're called is Black. But before migrating to this country, they're not called Black. Blackness is a socially construct ideology within the Canadian or these white Western societies. And before we start to, try to understand and fix Blackness, we need to identify our identities ourselves. And that's a huge problem within our African descent communities. And, part of the reasons why this continues to, this white settler ideology, as I like to call it, but this has come from, I'm going to drop gems here purposely, folks like Frantz Fanon. If you don't know Frantz Fanon, please know these authors. There's great authors in our Canadian moments, like Tamari Katosa, Dr. Tamari Katosa, Dr. Sian Wilson, Dr. Carl James. These people are speaking about these things. But we're still within these Canadian moments, still siding with this ideology of whiteness. Everything we know, everything we come to know ourselves is through whiteness, through that lens. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not necessarily, I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing, but it's something that we should be aware of. And that's being stripped from us every day when we encounter this social world. When we talk about, back to there's a few points here I would like to mention, the social determinants of health. And Dr. Lamptey, I really appreciate what you mentioned. You had mentioned, we need to address, as you mentioned, you're respectfully saying, we need to address social determinants of health now. I would critique that and say we need to address social determinants of health before now, prior to this pandemic. I'm going to be vulnerable in mentioning this as a Black man, as I start talking about Black masculinity, because, I stay in my lane. I remember years ago when I went to visit my doctor for a physical, I went, knowing that, I'm healthy, no issues on my side. Doctor pulled out my chart, said, Warren, everything checks out. You're positive, everything is, no concerns. Oh, by the way, Warren, it doesn't mean you don't have AIDS. What? So I look at him, I say, I'm sorry, are you telling me that I have AIDS? Is that what you're telling me? He says, no, Warren, I see a lot of you guys come in my office, and then I have to have these conversations. So this social determinants of health has started years ago. I'm a healthy Black man or African descent man. I am healthy. But the thing is, we're generalized, we're stereotyped, and we're fixed in these categories every day. Every day. One of the things we have to think about from an intersectional lens now, bringing that into play, is that how do we come to understand self? Anti-Black racism does not impact all Black Canadians or African descent Canadians the same. That is a misconception. When we think about marginalized Black men versus high socioeconomic Black men, that's a different type of anti-Black racism they're experiencing. Are we ourselves educators, politicians, leaders within our community? Are we doing a good enough job to address these things and to acknowledge the hurt and the pain that we are experiencing within our African descent communities? Take from my research on Black marginalized men within Ontario and Quebec. One of the things that they continue to be told is that they're Black, they're thugs, they're criminalized, or they're criminals. This is a common stereotype that they face, much like many other Black men, or if not all Black men. But one thing they continuously receive is they're pushed to the margins where they don't receive an education. There are moments in our education system right now as we speak that many Black youth or African descent youth in formal education are pushed to receive something called a local development degree, a diploma. Does anybody know what that means? I know people can't answer that question, but I'm going to answer the question anyways. Here we go. Local development means that your diploma means nothing. It just means that you've passed high school with nothing to really, attribute for you to go to post-secondary education. So when we think about social discourse and education and the need to educate our youth, they're being stripped of that right. They're also being stripped of their childhood, which is another concern. Robin Maynard says it in her book, her recent book, Police and Black Lives. Childhood innocence is afforded to white youth. I've spoken to many community members in the Ottawa region, particularly this one African descent woman who called me and mentioned her 4-year-old son was suspended for 3 days for raising his voice in class. 4 years old. He's already being stripped of his right to be a child. So when we talk about anti-Black racism, and Ngozi, I trust I'm adding value to your knowledge exchange here, we need to actually identify how it's impacting, how it's moving, how it's disrupting people's lives, not only from general, but from an intersectional lens, which is very important. Because as much as I stand here as a Black man, I still have privilege. I'm still able to access certain social requirements for my being, much more so than many other Black men who are marginalized. So we have to think about these concepts, how this is flowing within our Canadian moments, and what whiteness, not white people, but what whiteness is doing to us and continues to do to us in our contemporary moments today. So I'm going to stop there because I know I can go on a rant. I heard.
Well, yeah, it's a very, this is, as you said, that's why, as you said, we should not confine these discussions just to this month, and we won't do that. It's important to acknowledge the month and thank the people that made sure at least this space was carved out, but it's something that we should continue to talk about. I'm maybe just going to throw it all out to you for, pardon me?
I said August.
August, yeah.
Anybody who knows me knows that I do August, not February.
Yeah. I would love for us to reflect. I mean, one thing that I will say is that just with respect to criminal justice, our party does not support mandatory minimums exactly because we still have not done the work with the rest of the system, and so that's the least we can do. And so we want to see things go further than what was done over the course of the last week. But I want to end on perhaps a hopeful note. And as I said, have other discussions with all of you. These are themes that we will continue to raise and create a forum for. But in your, let's say in your areas, as you said, in your lanes, this time next year, if we invite you back, Dr. Lamptey, Ngozi, Professor Clark, if we invite you back this time next year, if you can pick one thing, what would be the one thing? And I normally don't like doing lists and favorites, but if there's one thing that you would like to see in your lane that has been profoundly improved, what would that thing be? I'll start with. I'm going to cut it short. I'm really going to give you about 30 seconds, but I'm going to ask you first, Professor Clark, what would that thing be?
A better and a more accessible approach in liberating minds, African descent youth minds in formal education, and giving them the tools and the education that's required for them to be successful within this Canadian nation state.
Okay, Ngozi?
One thing.
Sorry.
In my lane?
In your lane, sorry.
Well, one thing in my lane would be Emancipation Day recognized nationally, and that we have support to actually celebrate.
Thank you. And Dr. Lamptey?
I think what I would hope to see is that a year from now, the work that has been started to collect disaggregated data on health in various populations doesn't stop at the collection, that a year from now we've shown that the flow of that information has informed actions to actually reduce those inequities, and that the people experiencing them feel heard and feel part of the process to make their lives better.
So that basically absolutely stole my thunder, because, and maybe this is again because maybe it is the tiger in us, I don't know, because I was going to end with the wish of a full understanding of the power of disaggregated data. And so I absolutely agree with your point. I would say if there is one thing, I know it doesn't sound exciting, maybe it doesn't, it doesn't sound, it doesn't sound like it's going to light the world on fire, but I believe very much in disaggregated data. You have to understand a problem before you can approach it with the solutions, as Dr. Lamptey said. And so this touches on also what Professor Clark said. We really need to have disaggregated data about our equity-seeking groups in particular, so that we can understand the true nature of the challenges they face, so that we have a baseline to measure our interventions against. I'm with you on that. So this was recorded. This is going to be on Facebook. This is on various networks. We are going to come back. We're going to check in and see whether we have moved closer toward these goals. I'm with you to support you in all of those. Je veux remercier tout le monde qui était ici avec nous aujourd'hui. Nos souhaits pour la reconnaissance de la journée d'émancipation, notre quête pour l'information désagrégée. Tout ça, ce sont des vœux, mais des choses qui sont absolument dans notre pouvoir de réaliser. Alors, I will again not congratulate, but thank everyone for being here. Wish everyone a continued happy Black History Month. Absolutely, every month needs to be a month where we recognize the contributions of our Black diaspora in this country. Merci beaucoup à tout le monde. Thank you so much for being with us, and happy Black History Month.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This concludes today's roundtable. Merci beaucoup pour venir. Ceci conclut la table ronde. Au revoir.